Good morning, KV, and thank you very much for your time. We're super excited because we are having you as a guest in the Leader as a Futurist series. You're one of the leaders whom I personally respect for the diversity and the depth of insights you bring. I've heard you in a number of forums, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, KV.
Good morning, Shripriya. Thank you for the opportunity to share. As you grow a little older, I think it gives great joy that there are people willing to listen to you. So that's my take from it. And thank you for the opportunity, and all yours to ask me some questions, and I'll share what I know or what I've experienced more than what I know.
Absolutely. And what I really enjoy is the anecdotes and the stories that you bring in. And they've always stood with me. I remember a lot of them from our past conversations, KV. And I'm hoping you'll give some for the audience today as well.
Sure.
So
what comes will come.
Absolutely. Let's leave it to the universe to bring out the best today. So KV, there is people are always consciously thinking about the future. A lot of times we worry about the future. And yet, there are some challenges as to how to see it clearly. So how can leaders develop this ability to see the future clearly? Because there's so much of chaos around us.
Good. Very good question. You see, everyone wants to know their future. That is why people run to astrologers.
Yes.
To predict their personal future. Companies also in India go to soothsayers to see what's going to happen in the future. And large corporates today have innovated on something called trend-setting workshops where they call leaders. I've had the opportunity to attend a few of them in Europe, representing Tatas with a very diverse set of companies being brought together.
Wonderful.
You know, a telecom company, an IT company, a shipping company, a food manufacturing company, a pharmaceutical company, a research company, all of them sitting together and saying, let's spot the trends, because it's not an easy thing to predict the future. I'll just step back a bit. Since we're talking about leadership practice, in modern way, the way we are practicing our leadership and management, they have increasingly become very left-brained, very data-centric. Important to have data for sure.
Yes.
But data do not prove really what the future is going to be. It is behaviors, trends, innovations, disruptions, which you can't easily find. And more often than not, the mindset of a leader is more linear than discrete. And if you only tickle and activate your right brain and willing to look at some gray areas and be comfortable that you can't find answers to everything, you start learning about what the future is.
Yes.
Because future is always discrete and it's not a very linear thing for you to predict. If it was a linear equation, you can say what is going to happen tomorrow if this is the basis of it. But it is not predictive. It is not so easily correlated to the past. And therefore, it becomes more important as a skill or as an insight. I'll again step back a little more in terms of leadership practice to say how you develop it. I think it's more a sense you get about how your gut, your sense, when you watch and you perceive very carefully. To me, knowledge, intelligence is on one side. And what experience should bring to people when you travel the distance of life in corporates or in your own life, there's a lot of learning that takes place. And then you become wise. I won't say all the leaders are wise. Some are wise, some are otherwise. Very intelligent. but I think what distinguishes them, in my view, is I have my own acronym for wisdom.
Okay.
And to me, W stands for widening the intelligence. WI. Intelligence in a narrow pathway is more a science, actually. But when you use your intelligence on a wider scale, widening the intelligence across subjects, things, interests, whatever it be, with the diversity that goes around, you're building some experience.
Yes.
And then what does experience do? It brings success. So it's widening intelligence across success.
Yes.
So you know what works, what doesn't work. you develop some intuitive skills there.
Yes.
Then the D is you need to be defeated. I
You need
use the
to
word
be defeated, is it?
defeated.
Okay.
Failure could be collective.
Yes.
Defeat can be very personal.
Yes.
It's like losing a race, failing an exam, or
Yes.
making a mess of your decision. So you need to have success, you need to have defeat. Wisdom, you're getting there, and you need to do this across many opportunities.
Correct.
And when you do it again and again and again, you start maturing like old wine,
Yes.
and you become valuable because you develop a better perceptual ability
Yes.
to look at the environment. And that perceptual ability involves three things in my view.
Mm-hmm.
One is insight,
Okay.
deep insights. Second is with those deep insights come intuition. It is not very logical process, but you develop that feel about intuition. And when you have both insight and intuition, you become a very tall antenna. I will take a small example or a story.
Yeah.
The Greeks are known to be great leaders.
Yeah.
And both, as kings or wise people who taught the world a lot of things.
Yes.
And they love their mountains, whether it's Delphi or Olympus, you all know about the mountains. And there is a story that gods used to live in mountains. So does the Indian philosophy that Kailasha, you have the gods and all that. But the fact of the matter is there is something about this mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking this morning about this ability to be like an antenna in perception for a good leader is you got to rise up.
Yes.
And these guys would go on top of a mountain to sit down and start talking about issues, thinking about issues, sharing about issues, a lot of discussions. It was not a common conference room. People would say, just let's go up. And I think the whole climb itself was an experience of another sort of perseverance to get to the top of the mountain.
Correct.
Something about leadership and mountain. At a common sense level, look at it. When you go at the height, your visibility improves spatially.
Correct.
I'm giving an example because leaders are becoming very narrow in their ability to think through with very focused intelligence, data and all. But then they miss the spatial look at issues.
Correct.
And when you rise above,
yeah,
just like from an aircraft, you see a lot more of the ground than when you're on the ground. So that ability to rise up the tent
yes,
and look at your fox, look at your business, look at the armies at you, look at the war that's happening, look at the geopolitical situation, look at tech. So I think it's a whole set of absorbing through a very strong perceptive antenna that has to be right up there.
correct.
I think that's the investment you have to make. That's a practice you should make your own. And I think then you'll pick up a lot. I think I've already said a lot in my first opening.
No, this is very interesting, and especially when you gave the example of a mountain. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak to my mentor, and he was just telling me that, look, wise people, they, the mountains, you look at it as a mountain and water flow. And then today, the intelligence is broken. A mountain can be a mix of multiple rocks of different sizes, and water could be multiple droplets coming together, and then ultimately you realize that it's a mountain and a flow. That is what. So there is this shift in a human perception as we age. So we understand something, and then we break it down into pieces, and then again, as we become wise, we realize to look at it as a mountain and water. How do you what's your thoughts about this? As human beings, we go through a cycle in terms of understanding, getting wisdom, and then translating it and leading fulfilling lives. Now, as we move into the future, how should one look at this, KV?
Good. Since you talked about water, I'll give you an example from water.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you see the sea routes and how ships move,
Mm-hmm.
there is a predictable conditions of the sea. There are maps, though there are not written by the guidance of the, the tools which are there on navigational tools on a ship, you're able to get to one destination to other. And this is mankind and humankind, which has been able to innovate this some thousands of years ago before shipping started. And we still use the same navigational concepts. Right? In a corporate structure, and you look at the future, you don't know the map of the ocean, the temperature, and the volatility, and how the sea moves. And you have to take your ship forward, or you need to sail through it.
Yes.
As a leader, I would say there are three sets of people who will fall into it. Okay. One who are least bothered. They're very happy and comfortable in their little ship, and they say, I think the ship will take care. It is built for multi-weather, multi-conditions, and I really don't have to worry about the new weather conditions, and I'll go full pelt, and the ship is very well organized, and everything is very comfortable, very nice. That's a false sense of security that many of us live with. Because as you mature and become the top guy, you feel that you've got a whole army to, battle out. The second set of leaders are those. So I know it's a rough sea out there. I really don't know. But I will jump in and put my head out of water. I'm giving an example of swimming here. That means I am capable of keeping myself afloat and put my head out and keep getting.
Yes.
That is the adaptable leader to future.
Yes. Correct.
Someone who can all-weather leader. But the third set of leaders are not very common. These are the ones who say, I can see some new waves on the sea, a new disturbance coming in, and I will sail over them. I will take the ship right up there and take the pressure of those waves to take it to the next level completely, which means you are actually riding the future. That is actually a very small set of people who are able to go to that leap. It's like a pyramid. Large number of them are comfortable. I've got a good ship. Second say, no, doesn't matter if I have to jump in the sea and still go around. I'm very adaptable. I can take everyone to be adaptable, keep the head out of the water and keep going along with the swing. But there are very few people who say, look, let me ride the wave. Let me create the wave. Let me take it to a new future. So these are the three types of leadership. And I think for being the third, you just not have to be perceptive, insightful, and intuitive, but you need a huge amount of courage.
Correct.
And self-belief. And you don't get data to support you always to say that that's the right decision. You may have data to say something. In this data-centered world, I always lose a battle because I can't beat the data people because they've got hard data. I don't have. I've got my soft thinking. So this is where the battle has to balance for leaders. Take both.
Correct.
You can't ignore the data which shows certain lines, as well as your ability to see beyond the data and see where it is actually moving.
Wonderful, KV. I mean, now since you talked about the wave, I'm getting this. There's always as we move into the future, there are certain things where we can be behind the change. There are certain things where we can be along the change. And there are certain things where we can be ahead of the change. How should leaders, play this ratio or, understand how to, it's not always like you see a lot of young organizations coming up so passionate about an idea. And they're so ahead, it looks like, and then suddenly they're no longer there. So how do you really learn where to be? Because nothing is wrong in either of these places. Perhaps, we don't know. But how do you really manage to understand when to be behind, along, and then ahead, KB?
Very good question. There isn't a formula to, provide. It is again three things which, in my mind, come to me based on my own experience and practice and watching leaders. We talk about fundamentals. Now, fundamentals are not essentially the financial fundamentals or the strength of a company or your people fundamentals. These are all given.
Yes.
But from a leadership fundamental, belief structure.
Correct.
Disruption and destruction, they rhyme very well. You must embrace disruption, but have to risk balance it that it does not cause destruction of your value. So I think there has to be a protective part of your strategy, which takes care of your current and near future
Correct.
and extract better value. So I would say, like, I like my cooking and others, so I can give you an example of how you cook. You see, one way of doing it is there is a traditional dish, which is wonderful. Okay. And that feeds people, and you know for sure that this works. You make a good dish, Indian dish, and everyone loves that dish, biryani or pulihore or something. Fantastic, right? It goes very well. And you know how to make it too. You're an expert. That's what most organizations who have had a record of performance are. Now, there is something future is coming up, and there is some new ingredients that can be added into it to make it taste different, make it taste better, yet it maintains its character, which I call is progressive change. You're able to bring future elements into your current to give and deliver value to your existing and new customers and an experience that is wonderful. And it can happen in any sector. You can bring new technology into an existing technical play and so on. You can give no futures, but you don't disrupt it.
Correct.
Yet, on the other hand, you have something completely new, which you don't know. It is neither a Chinese cuisine you're bringing in, or a Western cuisine, or a vegan cuisine. Doesn't matter. The world is talking about it. But can you go completely into it? I think that requires training, that requires testing, that requires acceptance, because ultimately, you're talking about business leaders. Business leaders are leaders only when there is a business. If there is no business, there is no leaders, there's no company, right?
Correct.
So you need to protect the elements of the fundamentals of the business. So when I say leadership, the leadership fundamentals are protect the core. Sometimes need to disrupt the core, but that has to be done very carefully, because otherwise your longevity is questioned.
Yes.
You have to modernize your existing while you embrace completely new. These are for going concerns.
Yes.
They come from a disruptive world, which is the new startups. They don't have a baggage, they don't have a past.
Correct.
But they have a lot of future to be risked at.
Correct.
You see, a guy who's in business, for us to protect the past is the biggest challenge. The startup is to create the future is a bigger challenge, because there is no past for them. It's only all future. They may think they have no baggage, but they also don't have the strength of a performance.
Yeah.
And the credibility of being in the market and of revenue and of balance sheets and of P&Ls, none. So they are free birds flying, but sooner or later they need to perch on the tree and create their homes and create value for themselves and the customers. So when I see about leadership journey, whether it is for traditional existing companies or new companies, get your fundamentals right of the business. Then you could do good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said, KV. There was one another point that you touched some time back, which was on intuition, right? That's a very important aspect. Sometimes it is told that, oh, you become very intuitive, perhaps when you have a deep spiritual practice or a deep meditative practice. That's one school of thought, or that's how we thought intuition was. And now you realize that intuition is something that it is part of your ecosystem. It's part of the physical intelligence that's all around us. Now, how should the younger generation or the future look at cultivating this, and having this as an aid and a strength for them, KV?
Good question. Difficult to define intuition, because intuition occurs. You cannot cultivate it. Yes. In the sense that you can collaborate with your intuitive faculties, but you can't say, I'll get it now because I want it.
Yes.
It doesn't come on command. How does it actually develop? First and foremost, I think our mental reliance on our analytical abilities is very useful, but overemphasized, because a typical management guy or in MBA is trained more on the analytical, deductive reasoning through all his subjects. Yeah. Though there is an emphasis on arts, there is an emphasis on creative writing, there will be an emphasis on imagination, creativity, innovation, all the new buzzwords are there. But this comes a bit later. It is not so well entwined with their logical processes
Yes.
that you find many people being very logical. And usually those who have a bit of an intuitive capability or a more creative capability may not be extremely logical. In fact, I'm reminded of again a Greek guy who says that the true intelligence resides in some, remote part of your brain or remote part of your team. Actually, those who don't speak up much, maybe having some very intuitive, insightful inputs, which they don't even bring out because they know that they get smashed in a meeting. Logic will come and smash them. So you need to provide that space and time. So 3 or 4 things I'll tell you how you can experience that you have intuition. And intuition comes to every person.
Yes.
As you lead life, your mind is not the only one that has intelligence.
Correct.
There is an intelligence of the body. Sometimes when you're going into a situation, something bodily strikes you and you feel scared.
Yes.
There is no logic to it. You just feel scared. You go to a place where your body says, this is the place. It's not your mind. Mind is only picking up the signal and sending you to a heart. And what a great morning on a beach, where you see the sunset or the sunrise. There is a whole thing that envelops you. So there is a bodily intelligence, there is a memory-led intelligence, and there is overall something when you silence yourself and you pull yourself back, something strikes you. And a lot of work has happened, what we call a subconscious level. We have a conscious life and we have a subconscious. Many of us go through stresses, particularly young managers can't get sleep at night. They get extreme stress and they get dreams. And I remember attending the dream workshop many years ago when I was a young manager, where one is taught for 1 week entirely reading your own dreams and seeing symbolism and meaning from it, which actually is giving you guidance to your day-to-day work. The whole field, I mean, I can go into that, but it's a whole field, because what's happened is you subdued your subconscious so much that you're not taking those signals. Correct. If you open up, suddenly you make it a solution coming out of a dream sequence. If you can recollect and remember, it would come. So for a lot of this, a couple of basic things would be very helpful. You can't hope you will get very intuitive overnight.
Yes.
But first is you have to be receptive.
Correct.
Firstly, be receptive to everything that happens around you, good, bad, indifferent.
Correct.
Here again, forget the word, pick the voice. When people are talking to you, you're sitting in a meeting, correct, see the emotion that is what's going on. So you perceive much more than what is being said, correct, what is being felt there in that room, except take it. You got to receive a lot. You've got to assimilate all of that and let it rest. Normal mind is, after all this, is this right? Is this wrong? Can you suspend judgment and let it rest within your conscience or subconscious level? Then you are struggling, and suddenly there comes a moment when the second word I would say is receptivity. Second is, after receptivity, stop thinking and reflect.
Yes.
The reflection is actually looking at it with a mirror.
Yes.
Whatever your experience, good, bad, indifferent, it could be mental, it could be emotional, it could be logical, it could be illogical, no matter what. If you start reflecting on it, correct, then suddenly you don't know where it strikes you, but you start getting a sense, perhaps this is the right thing to do. And the Eureka moment hits you, and that is actually intuition. Now, intuition takes into account what I call this, what I raised out in the beginning. It's not linear. It takes a very discrete set of things. What's happening in the world, what's happening with your people, what's happening with your team, what's happening with your environment, what's happening with your competition, everything together is very difficult for a straight line, linear data processing kind of solution. Correct. It's multivariate. And all of that together, if you put it and let it rest for a while, you might get it, but also there are times you may get nothing. So let's be honest about it. You can't force intuition to come. But if you start developing the skill of reception and reflection quietly, there are chances that you will develop that. And once you get it, it is such a clear message to you. There's something inside you tells you this is it. And you take it. And then you start developing that confidence that, look, my intuition is worthwhile. And you will check data. I mean, you can't go and say, I intuitively feel that I must make now space rockets and I want to make the company to invest. I think that would be a complete disaster. So then once you get the idea, then you start polishing it in terms of risks and evaluations and so on.
Correct.
So
Well
that
said.
is my sense.
Wonderful, KV. I mean, I want to move to another interesting. There are these interesting words that I come across and we all hear a lot, say correlation, causation, contradiction, connection. How do leaders piece together a cogent strategy? So, there are so many choices before them. So how do they build a cogent strategy?
I think I perhaps mentioned this. You see, correlation, causation are interrelated. This is linear. Okay.
Yes.
Connection is also related because it's like a correlation. Contradiction is what comes out from outside or in your mind. So it's still a very linear set. So when you want to take a company or take a strategy from point A to B, but what you don't really take is what happens out of the environment, which you are not able to even identify today. You not even put it as a possible causal thing, because if you don't identify them, only when you are able to correlate and find the cause of it and what is a contradiction to its connection is a very logical process. Okay. Where I'm coming from is that's not sufficient. You need to be able to enrich this to be able to say from where what will hit. For instance, a pharmaceutical innovation somewhere may impact your telecom somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you relate this to the completely unrelated? So in this larger world, when you're looking at future, the unrelatable things become relatable. And that is why I would say leaders need to build some spatial thinking and take up subjects which you've never done before. And that teaches you a lot of things. For instance, in boards today, we have very predictive kind of people who are very same and similar. They all agree to each other with similar kind of experience. Why don't you put a stage actor in a board or an artist or a dancer? They may not understand your stuff, but they understand something else that you don't understand. They perceive things that you don't perceive. So I think this ability to bring very diverse sets of things and then create the correlation creates the winning recipe.
Wonderful. Very, very well said, KV. And I think that's really an important strategy for organizations to think as they move into the future. As you rightly said, why don't you bring an artist or a cultural leader into your boards? And that's when you can get diverse perspectives.
Correct. See, the problem is too predictable, too similar, will not create really a future. And this is what most corporates are stuck in. How do you break from it? They say, I want to break from it, and I want to break from it in a very conventional manner. So there is nothing to break from. You're still in the same prison in some sense. So you have to provide space. Leaders have to provide space.
Absolutely.
And I also believe that leaders need to learn to pause. With a tired mind, you can't think of the future. You have to provide time for reflection, time for thinking, time for reading, observing, engaging, and doing things which normally leaders are not so involved. For instance, whether it's a political debate you're going off for, a management conference is one thing, or environment. But why don't you go into doing something and learning something about medical discoveries, which has nothing to do with you, but it's just an interest area. Or you talk about, AI, everybody talks about, but there's so many other, oceanography, for instance, what resides below the earth. There's so many things that actually widen your scope of, again, I said, you become a very powerful antenna. If you're a powerful antenna, you'll get a lot more ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to ask, you've developed and grown and you've become the leader who you are today, KV. And how did you personally learn to see around the corners? Especially with so much of change, you might have seen decades of change and you're here today. So how did you learn? What are your experiences? Like, how did you see around the corners and make the right shifts?
Yeah, I think two parts of it. I think we have learned to become again mental managers. And my net learning, I shared it at one of my interactions with future CEOs. I said it's quite simple in my view. It's the 5 senses of leadership which you should practice if you want to be a good leader. Firstly, ability to see what others don't see. In a meeting or in a future or in a strategy, develop the skill. If the majority are seeing the same thing, then you're looking at the same unidimensional. You look at the other dimensions which are not there. Develop the skill to see what others are not seeing. That's one powerful leadership skill. The second is, I talk about smell. You need to smell the opportunity or the risk or the danger. You see, why you use smell is, that's not very logical process. The dog goes and finds, where the drugs are. Why can't a human find it? Because it's got that perceptual ability. So I think a good leader has that nose for good opportunity, nose for danger. This is exactly a summation of what I've been saying for a while, right?
Yes.
The third is your ability to hear. You hear what most don't hear. Ear to the ground, we have heard. But more than the ground, your perception of knowing the buzz, knowing how emotions are playing, knowing what is being said, and ability to hear what people have not said to. That is more perceptive, right?
Correct.
Now, the last two. How do you use your tongue, Success and failure, when you taste success, there's nothing like it. You can't express success in, success means I feel elated. No, you've tasted success. That's why I said defeat and success. A taste, actually, it remains for a lifetime because, like your main tongue tells you what the taste is, whether you like it or don't like it, or you remember a taste after 50 years what you've had. Your great grandmother must have made something and you say, I can still remember the taste of that particular dish because that's very powerful sense. And using in management way, that is actually your experience of sensing.
Correct.
Last is your touch. And touch is your ability to reach out. When you meet people, you're building bonds and you never do this journey alone as a leader. It is your teams, it is your partners, it is your customers, it's your technology suppliers, it is your joint venture partners. How do you build a very powerful bond of trust by care, compassion, and ethics? So I think that's the touch. You touch somebody and you get more than 100% from them to your goals. So I think these are some very basic, it's so simple to remember. These 5 senses, if you develop them, it would be very useful for leaders to become good futurists too. And if you ask me personally, I have had the privilege of working with some great bosses. I think more than the books and the institutes, you see the master in practice. And it is like a performance. When you are learning Indian classical music, I'm into it, you are into it. You see the senior student sits, let's say sitar player is there, the junior guy just sits with him. And then when the maestro plays it, there's no greater learning than seeing the maestro perform. And you're sitting on the stage. And then he throws sometimes at you, and then you take those next 3 minutes or 4 minutes while he's still on the stage.
Correct.
So career too, I'm very blessed. I've had such masters under whom I'm most delighted and grateful. Some of them are still around and keep in touch. Some of them have left the world. But what I've learned from them is absolutely remarkable. And it's a lifetime knowledge because it's hand-holding. You've seen how they perform. And a lot of the styles, a lot of how they did assimilates in your personality and makes it your own. Of course, you do add your own ingredients to that leadership style and you emerge as one. So there's again no practical workbook to achieve what you want, but I think you just need to have the ability to find. And I think these days bosses and the subordinates have become very impersonal. All the communication is only through email. That is terrible. I think you've got to perform on the stage. You've got to perform through a crisis. You've got to perform through a success. Then you really know how it is.
Correct. No, I mean, from what it tells me is that when you have to use your senses, it's all about qualities like having the ability to, willingly experiment. It takes time. I guess you can't just become perceptive, or you just can't hear, as you said, hear from the ground, hear all around. It requires, of course, coordination, your connection with people. Forging connections with people are very important. Developing that compassion and compassionate curiosity is also very important. But all of this takes a lot of time, KV, and nobody has time.
Well, sir, I think it's less of time. Whatever time you spend, there are three things that stand out in any human relationship or your leadership. Your authenticity.
Yes.
Be real, be yourself. Don't try to be something because it's going to be good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And get rid of self-consciousness. It's good to be reflective, but self-conscious persons are those who are at every minute, every hour, that they are conscious of how am I being seen? Is the media picking my message? Are the teams being influenced? Am I looking good? I mean, you don't have to be looking good all the time. Please be real. Please be authentic. You'll be respected.
Absolutely.
Second, the power of empathy has no equal. If you are an empathetic leader, it will naturally come. So I keep saying, don't try to be somebody, just be yourself. But authenticity is also being truthful, being honest, being real. And I've had occasions when I call my team and said, I'm very upset. I'm completely down today because, I mean, it doesn't show my inconfidence. It shows my, humanness to others to say that I'm not an infallible person. I can make a mess of it. And when you say this to your direct reports, I tell you the amount of honesty you get from them, sir, you will get a lot of learning. I think we can be very well reverse mentored today as leaders by the younger people, the best of both.
Yes.
How do you collaborate with young people if you're not willing to listen and adapt and say that you're good in it, I'm not so good? So building those bonds of trust is empathy, authenticity. I think basically two words.
Wonderful, 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 KV. Now it tells me that one way of planning for the future or looking at the future, we all talk about it's like thinking in bets. We're all betting on the future. At what stage should leaders cut their losses?
Good one. I think we covered it a bit earlier. I
Yes.
think fundamentals of business tell you protect the core, protect the base.
Yes.
While you do experimenting and doing the trial, don't go in such a level where you're going to become destructive and destroy value. That's the main issue.
Correct.
So I think you will develop that insight, you will develop that ability and the decision-making power as you keep running for a while. You can't do this immediately, but slowly you will.
Correct.
And older guys like us have learned it over a long period of time. And the young fellows who started their startups today, they're having an accelerated learning. In 3 years, they're learning what is right, wrong, and how to position, and they're much smarter. So I give it to them to create these future enterprises, and I admire the way they learn. And they fall down, they walk up, they get up, so they learn it. Not to place all the bets in one go, they learn it. So very often they say, first startup may not be successful, but the guy goes for the second and third and he succeeds because he's learned from it.
Correct, correct. Thank you, KV. That's good. I mean, you've been with the Tatas with a huge legacy of over 150 years, and the organization has such strong, respect, and it's an authentic organization. And whatever we spoke about as the qualities of leaders, it's an organization that lives by that values. Now, what will make Tatas successful in the next 100 years, or after 100 years, if there's still somebody is talking about them, what is it that's going to string the thread, KV?
Wonderful. Good question. I think, firstly, we're a very blessed organization, and I feel hugely blessed to serve this for the last 2 decades, this group. And given the values which have not undergone any change since the founder's time to today, 155 plus years, that binds this organization together because it's a living truth. As I said, for an individual, your personal authenticity is important. As an institution, we are authentic, we live those values, and all the leadership subscribes to it. And that's really a unique organization in that way, and the way it is structured, held, serving a larger purpose, etc. But talking about the future and how the group, such a diverse group, has brought agility into itself and recreated itself not once but several times. We are blessed with great leaders. So during Jayadi time, you know the whole history of how he created this into a fabulous enterprise. And when he left and Ratan Tata took over and it was being quoted as a company, say, how large are you? They say we are 5% of India's GDP in the earlier days.
Correct.
Then during Ratan Tata's period, we saw the opportunity around the world. He encouraged our companies to become global. We had lots of acquisitions around the world, almost two-thirds of a business in terms of value coming, whether it is in motors or whether it's in steel or chemicals or tea or beverages or hotels. We went very globalized in that sense. We have today a very young leader, fantastic mind, and a great futurist, if I may say so, and with very well-grounded fundamentals. And I can tell you a little bit about this journey that he has done as a massive transformation at such a short period of time. Mr. Chandrasekhar and our group chairman truly transformed the group. And last year, we've had the best ever performance of the group in terms of top line and bottom line, which is no mean achievement for a group which is getting close to 1 million people around the world.
Correct.
Across so many technologies.
Correct.
So let me just give you a few indications of his strategic focus. India is a very central and core part of our group, and India is growing. And it's at that inflection point in the history of India that is never before. And it may never be after either. So it's a golden moment for India today, and we are poised there. So every sector is promising huge amount of growth, and he has encouraged the group to think bigger, aspire bigger, the companies to think out of the box, and therefore we have made significant progress. He came up with 3 words, very simple words. This is where the basic, focus comes. He talked about 3 things. First, simplicity. We are a complex organization. Please bring simplicity everywhere in what we do. Second, do of scale. Let's not do 100 small things. Do what is of scale. And the group is so large, do synergy. So the first 3-4 years, the focus on simplicity, scale, and synergy transformed it. We went into 8 verticals and so. Now looking at the future, he's taken a few, as you said, bets, right? These bets are going to be very significant. And these will be careful bets. The world has changed. It has become, earlier it was China +1, now they're talking about India +1 too. Everything is moving to India. We made a major foray into electronics and also into semiconductors, which was completely new business. And this requires several $1 billion of investments. And it's completely new, transformative for the group, and we're going in a big way. Structured all our businesses around tourism as one cluster, which includes hotels, a lot of associated smaller businesses, and airlines. And today in India, we are emerging as a colossus of an airline with 4 airlines being merged and Air India. It was a big call. And I think we're in the journey of transformation and very confident we'll make a major impact in that area. And I think airlines overall in the world is going to be a future. For India, it will be a future both domestic and international. That's another area of growth that we've had. Our motors has been transformed. Electrification of vehicles, EVs, we almost have 85% of the Indian market, and people are waiting for our cars. So that has been another majorly transformative part. He's doing on sustainability and basically power, which is renewable power, which is another very large sector in which we are making significant investments. So all of these actually catapult the group into the future. And these are the things which you're talking about the next 30, 50 years. And I think every organization, and Singapore is a great example, it recreates itself every 10 years. And majorly changes after 20 years. So we have been in some sense every decade kind of transformation. And these years have been extremely, extremely transformative. I've not covered all the areas. For instance, our investments in airlines is not only in running airlines, but building aircrafts, building helicopters today, and defense. So it has gone very transformative in our new business areas. And I think these are going to power the future. and I get closer to my retirement, it gives me tremendous joy that I would be stepping off perhaps at the best time. Tata's will see its future for the next 1-2 decades for sure, and much beyond that.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, good to hear that. And it's somewhere all of us, in a way, as an employee or as a consumer, we've been associated with the organization, and we feel proud when we say, oh, it's a Tata product, right? And there's a pride in every person. And I'm so happy that an organization has created that and it's an example, KV. I want to ask one final question, KV, which is to say, what is one story that has stood with you? I mean, you from the past, it's relevant today for you, and even you will, as you move into the future, you will keep using that as a core for yourself or for the way you lead or for how you inspire others.
My personal story.
Yes.
I think I've completed 43 years in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting close. So there are moments of happiness, moments of distress, moments of stress, of depression, elation, achievement, failure. All of it comes together, just as in life. But one thing I tell myself, and I would tell many of the younger people, in the world of outsourcing, we outsource everything, right? We outsource our provision supplier to, our home maintenance to help us to cook and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, we have somehow managed to outsource our happiness to others. And what I mean by outsourcing happiness to others is we don't lead fulfilling or happy lives because we predicate our happiness on what my boss thinks, what my wife thinks, what my child thinks, what my neighbor thinks, what my friend thinks, how am I perceived, how am I perceived, how am I perceived. Again, that self-conscious perception kind of equation. And seeking joy and happiness from outside you is a sure recipe for pain and unhappiness.
Correct.
Because you've outsourced it. It's predicated on something else that has to perform to your wants, your needs. Increasingly, as I come to my evening years of my corporate, there is so much to be happy about every morning when you wake up. There's so much joy that you can bring to others and to yourself. And the more you spread the joy, more you spread the happiness, you will be a happy person. And you will vibrate so much positivity around you, no matter what happens. I mean, you have challenges. Yes, it's a bad day. It's a good day. You wake up the next day morning, say, yes, I'm there. So I think it takes time. It's easy to say, difficult to practice. But always I would encourage people of my age to younger people, please take your happiness into your hands and make yourself happy. And there is so much to be happy from within for what you have and what you've achieved and what you have been blessed with, and to be grateful for what you have. That's it. I think there is no cause for worry. I missed my promotion. I need to be here. I need to be there. These are all strategies to bring yourself into a point of unhappiness. So that's the way I would say a contented, happy person is a positive to himself and to others, and he spreads cheer. And I would just say that's one habit that you should make it. It's more a habit rather than anything else.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, so refreshing, and I think it's empowering to hear that, and that's something that we should all aspire for, rather than all the other periphery things that we keep working on. Yes, thank you so much, KV, and this has been a very good interview, and I'm very grateful for your time again.
I wish you and your viewers all the best, and just be happy. That's it. Absolutely. That's the ultimate key. Thank you.
Thank you, KV. Thank you so much.